Indie comics, or self-published comics, come in all shapes and sizes, and one of the best things about small comic creators is that they have the freedom to create more than just a comic book. Some come big, others come small, and sometimes they come in a really cool and creative dust jacket. Although it's not just comics that do this, that's what we're going to focus on today, and even some of the big players like DC will do it if it's a special issue. So today I'm going to walk you through the process of creating my own DIY dust jacket for our special limited edition Halloween comic that we're releasing this year. This is by no means a tutorial, this is only my first attempt doing this, but I still thought it would be cool to show you the process, the behind the scenes of creating them, and then hopefully it inspires other creatives to give it a go as well. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Like I mentioned, today I'm taking you through the step-by-step process of creating my own custom DIY comic book dust covers. Just before we get started, you may notice that throughout the video there are steps that could be eliminated and just seem like I'm doing everything twice, and that's just because of the resources that I had available at the time, and I'll touch more on those as the video progresses. So what I actually did to begin with was create the design of the dust jacket on my iPad so that it could just be printed and cut out how I needed it to be. I did consider doing each one individually by hand so that each cover was unique and that you would have an original bit of art to go alongside the comic, but unfortunately the window between making these and releasing the comic, it just meant that I didn't have enough time. So you could see at the initial cutout stage that the page had some guidelines on them, and this was done on the iPad so I had some idea of what size it would be once printed. The problem I encountered was that the printer I was using automatically creates a border around the page, thus shrinking the design. So if you look closely at the actual image size, it's a lot smaller than the guidelines, which in the end became useless. So if you are following along at home, depending on what printer you're using, it might be worth taking that into consideration, but it's just trial and error to make sure that you get the sizes right. And then once I've cut them down, you can see me gluing them onto a thicker piece of paper, which, as I mentioned earlier, this is where I seem to be doing things twice, and that's just because the printer that I was using could only handle a certain thickness of paper, which just felt too flimsy and cheap. So by sticking it to a thicker piece of paper meant that it had a nicer feel and it was a little bit more durable. Again, depending on what printer you have at home, you may be able to just ignore everything that I'm doing right now. So my Halloween comic is limited edition to 30 copies, which means obviously I have to do everything 30 times. This will obviously vary depending on your comic and how many issues you decide to release, but like I mentioned, with this being a limited edition comic, I wanted to do something different and special for it. I've seen so many amazing examples of other creatives making their own comic covers, and for mine I wanted to replicate the actual cover itself with a custom cutout of Travis's head that then folds down and reveals the comic itself. So this is quite a lot simpler than some of the other examples that I've seen, but again, this is only my first time doing something like this, so I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too complicated, just for my own peace of mind. Cutting out Travis's head 30 times definitely took its toll on my hands and my sanity, but we got there in the end, and now it's on to the home stretch. You can see that on the reverse side that's mirroring Travis. I've left a little small space, and that is so that I can actually hand number and then sign each copy. So this just adds to the collectability factor, I guess. Depending on what sort of dust jacket you're creating will depend on whether you do something like that or not, but like I say, because this is a limited edition to 30 copies, I wanted that to be sort of emphasised on the cover. we're almost at the end now. Essentially the final step is just to line these up with the comic and fold them round so it takes the form of the jacket. Now this is where the initial measurements that I mentioned at the beginning of the video are quite important. So it might take some trial and error of printing a couple of copies and changing the sizes just to make sure that they do fit, but as you can see it's the same width as the comic. Travis's head is the same as what it is on the cover, and then the back is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it doesn't matter so much just because all I'm using that for is to actually sign and number the comics. And then as with everything throughout this entire video, it's just a matter of doing this 30 times and then we are good to go. Then once you've finished all of that, it's just a matter of putting them into bags. You don't need to do this, I've only done this just to keep the dust jacket fitting neatly with the comic itself and so that they're not sort of flapping around. Plus it just looks a little bit nicer when you go to Comic Cons or markets and they're on display. But yeah, that is how I created my first comic dust jacket. If you like this video or if you've tried to go at your own, leave a comment in the description, and don't forget, if you want to see videos like this before anyone else as well as other benefits, you can join our cult on Patreon, starting from just £1 a month up to £8 a month. There's all sorts of physical and digital rewards as well as PDF comics that you can download as well. The link to join our cult is in the description below. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe, and I will catch you all at the next one. Thanks everyone.